Glad to be back. I do feel bad that we've been away a couple times this season. I know like Dylan's been busy with some work stuff. I mean, I was away last weekend, but hopefully I'm in it for the long haul now. And it's been a crazy 2 weeks, Dylan, because, this past week I was at a bar here in New York City watching with some people. And then 2 weeks ago for episode 5, I actually was at the RHAP event here in New York, got to meet some alumni from the current season. Like I met Rome and Teeny and who else did I meet? Rome, Teeny, Gabe, and then a couple other people. Then obviously met some previous alum like Dom, Abate, Eliza, Bruce. So it's a fun time. If you're ever in New York and people are watching the episode, it's always good to watch together. So
yeah, for sure. I'm gonna have to make my way to one of those eventually.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been in the works for me, but I've never actually got there yet. So eventually, maybe for the finale, we'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rome burns today. Finally, Rome goes out after what was a roller coaster run for him. I just want to say before we get into the actual how everything happened and how everything went down in the episode, I wanted to say that by the end of Rome's run, by the time he went out, and this started for me in the middle, I became so much more. I felt like I was rooting for Rome to figure it out. You know what I mean? And I like that he brought back a villain type that I don't think I've seen in 10 seasons plus. And when I say that, it's Survivor, I mean, between the people that they've casted and just the editing, Survivor's not given us a villain like Rome in quite some time. And it was kind of nice to just see someone be a little bit antagonistic at times. It was kind of nice to see people, to see someone fake cry, and kind of just make something up in order to try to save himself. This stuff was awesome. I will say that out of, if you're gonna not make the merge, please go out like that because that was about as good of a pre-merge run as you could possibly have in Survivor.
Yeah, and you know what? It's all semantics because for all intents and purposes, he made the merge. I mean, we can call it whatever we want at this point. I mean, he made it to One Beach, but no, I mean, Dylan, you're right. Where Rome is somebody who, he creates good TV. I mean, I feel like I've always said this in the past. I've always said the worst thing you can be on a show like this is neutral, where people don't have an opinion on you. It's they're just there. And I feel like the great characters or the great players we remember are both people we, either as a character or a player, someone who we love or someone who we hate. You're either amazing at the game, or we remember you because you were horrible at the game, or you were great TV, or you were bad TV. And Rome obviously delivered on the TV front. And again, this has been a crazy arc for me and Rome. For me, I still feel bad about, kind of being a little bit bashing him 2 weeks ago, meeting him last week. And I mean, look, I think Rome, obviously, it was a great episode for him. He kind of got that, Dylan, you would agree, that Drew Christie, Chris Noble, Roger Amazon type of episode fall arc where we knew it was happening from 10 minutes in, but it still was entertaining TV. It was not boring. Lots to get into this episode, but yeah, no, Rome definitely, for whatever your opinion was on him, left an impact on the season.
Yeah, and we're reading some articles now. Jeff is we've located someone for the season who we want on 50. So you never know. Maybe it's Rome. But yeah, shout out Rome. He ends up going. I think the more traditional merge style kind of hurt him a lot because we've spoken so much about this. Is when you have so many players on one beach, right? And everybody's voting, the more that everybody's looking for just the easy vote and the more nobody wants to rock the boat. So when he comes in with a reputation and nobody on the Red Tribe is really willing to go to war for him, back him up, it's hard for you to win like that, right? So, he was kind of close with Genevieve, but Genevieve's not going to blow up her game to try to, save Rome when there's 13 people left. Teeny, I mean, she wasn't going to save Rome, and obviously Soul was more than happy to throw Rome under the bus, right? So I think it was, given the fact that Rome did not win individual immunity, it was an uphill battle for him. And I think once he started pulling the same stuff that he was at Red immediately, and people started catching on to it, then it was curtains for him. It was over.
Yeah, no, and we'll get into it as we go through the episode in terms of how we got to that point, because obviously there was a chance that Rome was going to spread some seeds and Kyle was going to get in trouble. But once, like you said, Dylan, perfectly, once nobody was going to back him up and said, yeah, you can't trust what he says. And then Kyle, I mean, we'll get into it, but like once Kyle denies it and then Kyle becomes safe, it's like, well, the book is shut. It's like only a shot in the dark is going to save Rome at this point. But yeah, I think that's also a good point you brought up where this is the first season of the new era with no Mergatory. And obviously I know the first 2 seasons we had the Hourglass, but the first season where half the tribe is not safe and it's just a normal merge. And we go back to like, hey, 12 people are vulnerable, 1 person safe. You bring up a point where like, would Rome have been able to hide? Well, obviously if he was in the half that won, he would have been safe. But if his half lost, would he still have been able to hide behind somebody else? And with 12 people, are they just looking for one name? I actually was wrong. I made a prediction before the episode. I was talking to somebody else, Dylan, that this is also the first New Era season where the tribe that did not have the majority going into the merge didn't lose somebody. Like in every other New Era season, the tribe that had the most people coming in always lost a member. And maybe that's because that tribe, whether it was like Jay in 45 or Ellie in 43, like I think the biggest tribe doesn't want to become like the big target. So they say, let's just get rid of somebody. Easy name. Let's just throw out Ellie, Jay. Let's just get rid of somebody. And I was like, oh, the blue tribe going into the season this is going to happen. I was like, Tiana's going to go. Kyle's going to go. Gabe. I was like, someone on blue is going to get thrown out here because they don't want to be a threat. And obviously the Rome factor was a little bit too much to overcome. But no, I mean, I was surprised that with this twist of a regular merge, big twist. With that plus, Rome, this did not go how I expected.
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason that, the bigger tribe coming in ends up getting cut off is because I think it also depends on who the 6 is that loses, right? And I think it's just easier to like get that type of dynamic with the old mergatory format than just a normal merge. So, but there's so much like other small things to talk about because I do like with this normal merge that we kind of got. We got a lot of time of just the merged tribe just kind of just doing their own thing on the beach. And because of that, I feel like there's a lot to talk about, right? Yeah. Let's start where the episode opens, right? So obviously Rachel feeling on the outs after Annika goes home. You kind of just like, I don't know what's going on with Andy, but there's something going on here, right? I think like, his rise is almost like he always has that arc to it's like at the point where like this continues to happen on like every season or every other season where there's one player who has this type of arc to the point where like if I'm out there from now on and there's a player that like on day 1 I'm kind of just discounting, I'm circling back like 6 days later if he's still in the game and being like, am I underestimating him, right? Because this is kind of crazy how this continues to happen, right? Andy stays in the game. He's starting to gain confidence, and he's kind of in with Sam and Sierra, except for the fact that this episode, right? You kind of saw in that merge feast, whoever was there, Rome's name was the primary name, and then Sam kind of had no problem like throwing out Andy's name, which to me didn't make much sense. I know like Andy's name was kind of thrown out and he kind of just like went with it. Like, what's he supposed to do? He can't really reveal his cards too much. But the fact that Andy's name ends up being written down here is, did Andy get 2 votes? Did he get 2 votes?
Yes, I think it was Sue and Saul, I think, voted for Andy.
Okay. And then Rome just voted for Sam just to stir the pot.
And then everyone else voted for Rome, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is going to have an interesting ripple effect, I think. With like clearly Andy's going to have like a little bit of a wake-up call. He's always been playing from the bottom, but I do think that this is where like he might flip the switch from like surviving and skating through to becoming a real player in this game. His name's going to get written down. If he starts to go up to people and be like, how did this happen? And some people be like, oh, well, Sam was okay with this. Then that is something that I could see being very problematic for Sam. And again, I don't know if you're Sam, I'm not sure what you do in that situation, right? you could try to like bring up another name and be like, hey, like what about this person? But you don't want to like do that and piss everybody else off. But at the same time, like, you know, you want to keep your ally in the game. But I have a gut feeling. My prediction, by the way, I'm not sure if I said this on one of the previous podcasts. One of my main predictions for the season is that Andy ends up voting out Sam at some point. This kind of seems like a setup to the point where like this could be the start of where it happens. And I know I just started, you know, I went on this whole ramble just from talking about the first few minutes of the episode for the Yellow Tribe, but I'm getting, and then Andy on top of that, they're now giving him like the glory confessionals as he goes up to the voting booth where he's like speaking, I believe, German. Like, what is going on with Andy here?
I'm actually really glad you brought this up, Dylan, because we missed last week. And I think, even though this was the Rome episode, I think the bigger underlying implication is that Yellow is going to start to fracture. I think we're seeing the cracks start to form because obviously we missed last week. But, you know, Sam, and this goes back to your comment at the start of the episode, Sam had a one-time idol and he didn't play it because Andy didn't know about it and he didn't want Andy to feel like he lost some trust in Sam. And number two, he's like, oh, I can use this as a decoy down the road. And then, like you mentioned, they're at the merge feast and Sam doesn't bring up another name when Andy becomes a decoy boot. And I do feel like it's a tough spot for Sam because you're right. You're at the merge. You don't want to be just throwing out names. I think the only thing he could have done maybe was like go to Andy and say, hey, Rome is the vote. Someone brought up your name as a backup. We weren't okay with it, but you know, we didn't want to put targets on our backs because people already see me and Sierra as a duo and they see us as a trio and stuff. But you're safe, you're good. Like you can't throw out names there, but you got to let Andy know his name's coming up. And then obviously at the end of the episode, Andy getting 2 votes and then turning to Sam and saying like, oh, I was a decoy. So your theory's not, you know, out of the realm of possibility because this has been a season of betrayals from like, you know, John's blind side and Annika's blind side and TK and Asia. Like this has been a season of like betrayals, and every vote so far, someone has like really stabbed someone in the back. So it would not surprise me in the slightest if Andy, you know, somehow flips on Sam or flips on Sierra, because Sam basically is at a point where something's going to catch up to him. Whether Rachel reveals that Sam had the idol and Andy was the only person out of the loop, like even Annika knew about it, or whether someone goes up to Andy and says, hey, your name was brought up at the feast and they didn't defend you. At some point, something's going to get to Andy and Andy's going to like jump. It would not surprise me.
Yeah, I think, and if you look at just Yellow as a whole, I think Sierra's in a really tough spot. Not in terms of her life in the game, but in terms of getting her footing at the merge. I think like it would have been the right move, in my opinion, for her to go with the girls at the Annika vote and not with Sam, because I think that when everybody suspects that your alliance is a power duo and it actually is true, like even if you downplay it, you're never shedding that. You're never shedding it. If people assume it, they're going to assume it for the next 2 weeks or however long the game goes on, right? So I think, you know, it probably would have been just safer for her to just kind of just hop off the bandwagon while she could. Granted, she couldn't do it because Sam had an idol that was one-time use. So she didn't really have a choice, right? But in a perfect world, I think going with the girls would have been better because she needs to shed the image of her and Sam just being the power duo, right? And now you hit a merge where everybody still thinks that they're the power duo, right? And now it's like, if I were her, I'm going to the beach and literally trying to form alliances with everybody because this power duo is not lasting more than a few episodes, I don't think. It's either going to be targeted, trying to get broken up if she doesn't move fast, or no, I mean, I think that it will be targeted, I should say, if they don't move fast, right? Everybody's going to see them as a power duo. Andy's getting his name written down as a decoy voot. Alarm bells are going to start to go for him. And it's like, all right, like at some point, people are going to be like, they need to be broken up. So Sierra's in a tough spot. Sam, I feel like is about to be in a bad spot. And I think that, like you said, is the underlying story to what happened with Rome this episode.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that whether it happens next week or, down the road, I think it's going to happen because obviously the big storyline heading into next week is that now that Rome is gone, there's a lot of tension on Blue right now as well. Like actually, honestly, the best the best people and the people, I think the people that are going to go into the shadows now is the Red Tribe. I think Sol, Genevieve, and Teeny, I feel like can kind of fade into the background because Yellow has their cracks and Blue. I mean, they kind of all hate each other because, Sue doesn't like Tiana doesn't like Sue, Kyle and Gabe and Tiana. There's a lot of like circle firing squad with Blue. So I think next week and then the week after, you're going to see some fracturing from former Blue and former Yellow. And I think Teeny, Sol, and Genevieve can kind of now blend in, which again always happens. The smaller tribe always manages to find their way through. I will say, and I won't mention it on the podcast, but on social media, on Instagram, I saw like not the twist. I saw what's going to basically happen next week. Not a spoiler, like, but I know like what's going to happen next week. So I do think that's also going to play out some implications, but we can talk about that offline.
A twist?
Yeah, like a twist and like how things are going to kind of, shake up.
Okay.
But I do think the main storyline next week is either the Sam Andy tension or Blue like firing at each other.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, if you look at Red after Rome goes out, it's like, all right, who's really going to target Sol now? Nobody. Okay. Who's targeting Genevieve? Don't know who would be bothered by her right now.
Yeah. And everybody likes Teeny, so.
Yeah, and everybody likes Teeny, right? So Genevieve, I cannot shed the Kim vision. I cannot shed it. I cannot shed it. They look alike. Like I said, they're kind of, their mannerisms are similar. Like I think Genevieve, whatever happens to her on the season, whether she finishes first, whether she finishes third, she's not finishing third. That's impossible at this point. Whether she finishes fifth, like she is getting dominant player edit this season. She's getting the dominant player edit. How exciting. I'm like excited every time they show her at this point because I feel like something big is going to happen. Literally, when she said the thing about the buoy and they kept showing it and then they walked away and then she went back, I was like, let's go. Like I was literally cheering because she just seems to be doing like everything right. And as far as I know, no one's out there being like, oh, Genevieve's a big threat. Like, I don't think anybody thinks that, right? So, yeah, impressive stuff from her. But like you said, I think Red. All three of them are in a pretty good spot.
And speaking of Genevieve, I'm actually really sad that we didn't get to recap also last week because I know you would have come on the podcast and you would have loved Genevieve's little, because she's so funny in confessionals too. I think you would have loved like her little antics because I remember last week, that was the episode where like Rome was also trying to, stir the pot a bit. And then he tells, I think Sol with like, oh, Genevieve was like, you're a short-term ally, you're not a long-term ally. And then Sol goes back to Genevieve and Genevieve's like, did I say that? Like, I said it, but like, I don't want Sol to know that. So no, Genevieve is really fun TV. I can't believe they hid her from us for the first like 2-3 episodes. And then she just emerges. Who knows if she's on a Kim Spradlin type of arc, but Genevieve is very fun to watch. And by the way, like, I know that Sam and Genevieve walked away from the buoy and they came back. There's no buoys on Survivor. Like you had to know that was something. In 47 seasons, we have never seen just like a random buoy like by the beach. So I don't know why Sam walked away from it. Maybe he was like, I'll come back to it later, but I'm glad Genevieve got it. And by the way, Dylan, you know who this was a bad episode for?
Yeah.
This was a bad episode for Jeff. Because not only did they find that note that said, hey, there's an advantage on the beach for the challenge, and then not only does Sam and Genevieve walk away from it, but then most of the tribe says, we're going to ignore it. We're going to just socialize in the meantime. You have at tribal council later in the episode, they're like, yeah, we're just going to burn the amulets and we're just going to use it on Teeny. They're not going to matter in the game. Let's just get rid of them. And then Rome goes on Jeff's seat and says, yeah, amulets are stupid, Jeff. Like Jeff must be reeling from people saying like, yeah, all your shenanigans, Jeff, are not going to work. So
I like it. I love it. Actually, like we all know, we don't need to go on a podcast again and talk about how the amulets actually disadvantage. Like they know it out there now, right? Yeah. So I like it. I hope that it makes a meaningful impact in 48 and beyond, and I think it will. So really good there. Let's talk about. We just talked about like the buoy and advantage. Let's talk about the search and the player who got screwed here, really, which is Sue. First of all, a lot of things that happened that were bad luck, right? Like the Blue Tribe being the one to the merge camp, right? That is a problem for Sue, given the fact that she dug everything. The fact that Jeff made another the fact that Jeff put an advantage. Not only did he make the blue camp the merge camp. First of all, I wonder if that was on purpose, given that they knew that Sue had the paint and everywhere. Like, I wonder if they were purposely like, oh, this would be cool if we made the blue the merge tribe. Like, what if somebody finds the paint? I don't know if that's actually why they did it. It's probably because of just like camera and filming reasons they wanted to do it there. But I thought it was it was such an interesting layer. The fact that they're all going somewhere where there is like kind of like a paint trail and they're all looking for an advantage at the same time. So they just start digging places and naturally they find the shattered glass, the paint, and then all of a sudden the light bulbs go off for Tiana and Caroline. And they're like, oh, Sue found the idol. Right. And nobody else really knows that. But then, new school Survivor, the way that word spreads. I have quite the feeling that the entire tribe is going to know Sue as an idol within like 2 episodes. I kind of really cool job, I thought, by Survivor, by a moment that happened like 2 episodes ago, kind of coming back and like coming full circle. So I thought that was cool. The other thing is like, Sue, come on. Like, be better at hiding your stuff.
I mean, I think it was a happy coincidence because I do think they always merge on the tribe that has the most numbers, but obviously production's got to be just like smiling because they're like, look, we were going to merge on blue anyway, but the fact that we have the remnants of the pot and the paints just make it even more juicy. And that, like you said, they're searching for the advantage, so they were going to come across it. And going back to 2 weeks ago, I know we talked about it on the podcast, but at that point, because obviously the only thing that ties Sue back to this incident is the red paint when Caroline and Tiana saw it on her. I really think it, and again, you panic in the moment, you don't know what to do, you try to hide it. I think Sue, what she should have done the minute it crashed, she should have just like grabbed the idol and then just ran into the water and just completely got it off of her, and then come back later and try to clean it up, or at least if people see it like shattered, then be like, oh, who has it? It's not me, because it all comes back to the paint that was like all over her. But yeah, no, Sue had like the deer in headlights look, like, oh shit, like they know it's me. But good for Caroline being like, you know what, this is my number one ally. I know she has something. I'm going to keep it a secret. I don't even know if she will, because Gabe doesn't know, right? Gabe's not aware that she has it, right? Or no?
I don't think we've really heard anything yet, but I don't think so.
Because Gabe told Sue in episode 1 that he got the idol. I don't know if Sue ever told him about her.
I don't think she did. I think it's just Caroline that knows. I don't think she told anybody, and then Caroline like came up to her and was like, yeah.
So Caroline knows, which is good for them as an alliance, but obviously, Tiana starts putting the pieces together.
But Sue, by the way, we're talking about the Blue Tribe. Tiana feels like the biggest sitting duck ever. Like she's been, I feel like she's been a sitting duck for like 4 episodes now, to the point where like you feel like I feel like she's the next Blue to go by a landslide. Like everybody wants her out, I think, on Blue. And like I think that if like a name needs to be thrown out next week, her name is first to be thrown out. And you heard, I think Sue that was such a credit to her, almost like a Russell mindset. Like I know Russell did this on either 19 or 20. It was like, oh, you know about the idol, time for you to go home, right? That was and she was like, oh, Tiana knows about my idol, time for her to go home.
Yeah,
I thought that was really that's super underrated, creative, and like something that people don't do enough. So I thought that was really smart of her. And like I said, I think that if a name needs to be thrown out there, it will be Tiana. The question is, what could Tiana do with that information? If she finds that out, she could easily just be like, well, Sue has the idol, and then everything will hit the fan. And but like the Blue Tribe dynamic is certainly interesting. And if Yellow doesn't fracture first, I mean, Blue is right there as well.
I think it's tough because I feel like, you and I were both big Tiana fans in the preseason. And then I think after episode 1, we really liked Tiana. I wonder if this all goes back to the TK vote, where like she was really good with Kyle. She was good with TK. And I know they were in a tough spot because you have, Caroline, Gabe, and Sue as an alliance. So you would have had to either go to Rocks or you would have had to split that up somehow. But obviously, I think Tiana's path in the game looks entirely different because again, Blue hasn't lost since that TK challenge. So if you keep TK in the game and, Kyle and her were number one allies, but now you have Kyle in this episode going to Rome, and I know it doesn't matter this week, but you have Kyle going to Rome and saying, yeah, I think the biggest threats on the beach are Sam and Tiana. I don't think Kyle's saying that if, Tiana never flips on TK in that vote. So I don't know if it makes a big difference, but I wonder if her entire path in the game looks different if she doesn't flip on TK in that second vote.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think you're probably right. Like it did impact a lot of people's views on her on Blue.
Yeah.
I think, and we'll talk about him when we talk about the immunity challenge, but
Kyle
had
I'll do the backwards hat for Kyle.
Yeah, I thought Kyle had like a phenomenal episode. Especially because we haven't like seen too much of him. He hasn't had like too much to say. And yet I think like at least they made it seem like that he got to a point where like everybody kind of likes him, right? Like everybody trusts him. Like they know he's just going to be like honest. He walks to the water well and is like, yo, F Rome. Like when was the last time we've seen that in a Survivor episode, right? But then Rome saying on his exit press that Kyle was saying some crazy things and then that everybody else found out about it. So who knows how much that impacted anything. But I'm just going to go off of what we saw, right? Which is that it seems that Kyle's in a pretty good spot right now, right? I think that people have kind of assumed that Kyle's going to be like the honest guy. Like if you go to him and ask him for his opinion, he's going to give it to you how he feels. Yeah. If you go to him and ask him for info, he's going to give you info that he has. Like, I feel like that's his like spot on the season right now. And let's get into the immunity challenge, but this guy's going to be, he's one of those guys. He has the archetype. He's going to be an immunity challenge beast.
Yeah, he's like, and I've always said this.
Tyson type builds. He's like,
I was going to say,
yeah.
I've never, and we've been saying this for years in the podcast. I've never understood why the big guys I guess TK from the season, but you look at Jonathan wasn't targeted, but you look at those big guys and people are like, oh, we got to target the big guys. I never understand why they get targeted when people like you just said, Tyson and Kyle, like these guys that are, athletic and lanky, like they're going to do good at all these challenges. And Kyle could be a big challenge threat at the merge. I know you want to talk about the challenge. The one more quick thing I'll say is going back to Kyle and before the challenge, I do think he got a little lucky. I don't think Kyle has been overly savvy in the game. I do think he comes off as a very like old school, honest type of kind-hearted person and player. But I do think he gets lucky here because I think if he goes to anybody else, like he goes to Teeny, he goes to Saul, anybody other than Roman, and you say, yeah, Sam's a threat, Tiana's a threat, Sue and Caroline are not good at the challenges, but they're a duo. I think that really makes Kyle look bad. And I do think that then if he doesn't win the challenge, he could be a target here. Obviously, he falls into a good position by saying it to Rome and nobody backs Rome up. And Kyle kind of gets off scot-free and then he becomes safe. So I do think Kyle could kind of, like you mentioned, he could slide back into the background and then Tiana becomes a target. But he did get kind of lucky here by saying it to Rome of all people.
Yeah, I think that is a good point, right? It's like if he's gonna be honest to the right people,
Yeah. But the challenge, yeah.
Yes. Let's talk about the immunity challenge. I thought the challenge was awesome. Yeah. I liked Jeff wasn't lying when he's like a grueling challenge. Like literally, I always get cringed out by like when they have to crawl through mud and then like get covered in like feathers right after. And like that has to be like the most like uncomfortable thing ever. Obviously it wouldn't be a mergatory type challenge if there was no wall climb in the middle. So they had that, and then the immunity, and then they had the individual, which was like a classic balance challenge. So it kind of had everything. I really enjoyed watching it, and the stakes felt very big. You know what I mean? Like having immunity at that first merge at 13 is so big, especially when anything could be thrown out just to like be an easy vote. So I think it was super entertaining to watch. I like all aspects of it personally.
Yeah. So I'll give production and Jeff a lot of points here. I think having the regular merge basically back was great. Obviously, I think people were getting tired of the mergatory because even though I see your points, and Jeff made the same point as you on his podcast, where he's like, when you have all those people available, people are going to kind of like just defer to like a one option name, and then everyone throws their votes on that one name to stay safe, and it kind of doesn't create interesting, mechanics. Whereas if you're on a small little group of 6, and creates more scrambling. I still love a classic merge. I'll always love a classic merge. So I did like to see only one person in Kyle being safe. And also, Dylan, I mean, they just teased us here saying we're going to give you a schoolyard pick and then not showing us a schoolyard pick. I mean, that's crazy.
How did I forget? I knew I was forgetting something. The schoolyard pick, you had to have had the same reaction that I had, which was just like any Survivor fan that's been watching for a long time. As soon as he's a schoolyard pick, I literally jumped up, and then we didn't see it. And it was like, there was a clip. I didn't actually watch it, but there was a clip that was like surfacing on Twitter of like the actual schoolyard pick. Yeah. My only takeaway from the schoolyard pick, based on what I heard, is that Andy was picked last, and I'm like, oh my god, like how many seasons are people gonna be? How are people just gonna underestimate the guy who just like has a bad first episode or bad first 3 days? Like I'm like, wake up, people.
So it's even funnier than that, Dylan, and you're gonna be upset that they didn't show this. But and by the way, I was at a bar again watching this, and the whole bar cheered when Jeff said schoolyard pick, and then collectively groaned when they just jumped to the challenge. And we're like, what, how could you not show us? So I won't go through every single pick, but basically the highlight of the schoolyard pick was that they're going back and forth, and the last 2 picks, Dylan, are Andy and Sue. And what happens is then Jeff goes, Andy, like, tell me how you're feeling right now. And Andy does the whole, like, I was always picked last for kickball. I'm always last one picked, but I'm more confident in myself. I had to fight my way, whatever. He does this whole monologue, and then Jeff goes, all right, blue team, who's your last pick? And they go, we're going to go with Sue. And they still don't even pick Andy after that whole monologue. And then Andy's the last pick. And I'm like, that just is a slap in the face. But I mean, I know Jeff is going to say we have only a limited time. We don't have time to show a 4-minute schoolyard pick, but it was fun to see it.
Yeah, I hope they keep that in the future, because that's it adds certain, like, you feel a certain way if you're picked a certain spot, right? So it makes you it's like another strategy, right? Yeah. So that's why everyone loves it.
And by the way, 2 other quick things about the challenge as well. Number 1, obviously, even though she didn't win, huge advantage for Genevieve, right? I mean, she gets to skip the whole team portion.
Huge,
gets to go
huge advantage, huge.
And then gets to go into that challenge where she's not muddy. She's not like exhausted, getting to hold the bow that we've seen this bow challenge before. I mean, I think she comes in like 3rd or 4th, so she doesn't, make it to the final 2 with Sue and Kyle, but huge advantage for her. And then the other thing I was going to say was I kind of liked the twist in the challenge where we've seen that, like that puppet master thing before, where you have to navigate the ball through the table maze. And usually it's like only one person. That created a lot of fun chaos with, 2 people having to do it. And then obviously Rome and Gabe keep messing up, and Soul's like, can we switch? And Jeff's like, no, you can't switch. So
Rome another week where he's in the spot where he ends up losing as the 1 or 2 people working on, or 2 people I should say, working on either the puzzle or the maze, and Soul getting angry at both of them. So yeah, I think that's all I got from the challenge. Anything else like this episode that we have not mentioned? I think you brought it up before, but flushing the amulets, I think, smart move for all 3. I don't have too much to say. Like, you don't want the amulet. You don't want the amulet. Good job getting rid of it by then.
So I do think, because again, to remind people, like, they did see up through, like, I think Tiffany or Venus's vote. So I do think last season is really, really having like a big impact on people, because I just don't think they want to get caught with any target on their back, and they don't want to have something in their pocket. So, Gabe flushes his idol episode 1, and all 3. I mean, the fact that all 3 of them were even like, we're going to use this just to get it off our back. We're going to publicly say it. And we're not even going to, like, they didn't even say we're going to use it on like Soul or like Andy. Like, they didn't even tease like a possible saving somebody with it. They literally said, we're going to give it to Teenie because Teenie's in literally no danger tonight. So I do think that last season is having an impact on them. And also, you got to remember, 2 seasons ago, That was who had the amulets 2 seasons ago. It was Andy, not Andy. I literally was gonna say Austin, and I got Austin and Andy mixed up because like Andy said, I'm like Austin. Austin. It was it Austin, Jay, and Kelly?
Definitely Austin and Kelly, and then yeah, Jay.
And obviously, I'm not saying this is why Kelly was targeted, but obviously, there's a correlation between Jay and Kelly. Yeah, sure. So like Jay and Kelly both getting targeted by Austin in their spots. So definitely both of those instances are ringing bells for Caroline, Teeny, and Andy, and they go, let's just flush them. Let's get it off our back. Just put it on Teeny. Teeny's in no danger, and then that's it. So I mean, I'm happy that people are kind of looking at past seasons and saying this caused problems for other people. I'm not going to let it happen to me. So.
Yeah, right move by them. I think we could just spend the last like five or so minutes just like kind of talking about how we see the game unfolding going forward. We have 12 people left.
So before we look at the game going forward, I mean, because this might impact how you look at the game, do you want me to like tell you like basically like what next week is going to entail, or do you want me to just not mention it?
I would say don't mention it because I want to be surprised. But I will say personally, so we got 12 people left. Like you said, I think the 3 red are in perfect spots. They are where you want to be. I think there's going to be chaos going on between both yellow and blue. And like you said, red is going to fly into the background. I love where Genevieve is. Now that Rome's gone, I love where Soul's at. And Teeny also seems to be a great relationship with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think next week, I would say Tiana is in danger. I would say potentially Andy in danger, but I feel like he'll figure it out. But I do feel like if his name was thrown out now, it'll be thrown out again. Mm-hmm. And I think that if Andy's name does get brought up again, then all of a sudden, I think it is obviously it's going to end up being great for Rachel. And I think that Sam is going to potentially be a target somewhere along the lines here, whether it's this episode or next. So that's how I look at it going forward. I think also I can't shed, we haven't really spoke about him too much. If we're looking at blue, Gabe, I can't figure him out. And what do I mean by that is because how many times are we going to get the same confessional with him? Like, I came to Survivor to be a legend, to make the big move, legend. What he had that thing like, graduating to high school now is the merge now, right? Yeah. That's where legends are made. People make big moves at the merge. I don't know what's going on with him, to be completely honest with you, but we'll see. I just think that his edit's beyond interesting to me.
Yeah, so Gabe, and I do like Gabe because I do think he is a character, and he mentioned in the preseason he wants to be like a Russell, thinks Russell doesn't get enough credits, especially lately, but I think Gabe, for me, has one of 2 arcs because I don't think Gabe's going to win. I mean, could he win? Sure, but I don't think so, just based on how he's being edited. To me, Dylan, he feels like either kind of like Rome having like a big downfall episode, whether it's in the next couple of weeks where he tries to make a move, it backfires and he has a downfall, or to his credit, maybe he does make big moves, but then he becomes like a Jesse where he gets towards the end and then can't quite make it to the end and kind of becomes the fallen angel at 4 or 5. So I see one of those 2 arcs for him. I don't think he's going to make it to final 3. Although, to be fair, like Russell, he could make it to final 3 and he could, not get any votes. That's entirely possible as well. So I don't think he's going to win. But I do think he's in one of those 3 arc spots of a downfall, a fallen angel, or a losing finalist. That's how I see Gabe, one of those 3.
Yeah. And if you had to say, who do you think is, I know you said there's a twist that so without revealing the twist, but if you had to just predict, are you on the same page with me for the people who are in the most danger next week?
I am. I think red is fine for now. I can't see why anybody would go after the 3 of them. For blue, I agree, Tiana, because I think Sue at this point, because Sue doesn't like Kyle because Kyle wrote her name down and she doesn't like Tiana. And if I'm Sue, who's a bigger threat to me? A guy who wrote my name down a couple days ago in the game, and he wrote my name down. However, he's tried to come to me to tell me that Gabe was saying stuff about me, or Tiana, who sees my red paint. If Caroline knows, Tiana knows, and she's a danger to my game, I think Tiana's in trouble. Kyle could be in trouble because of like some of the, because of the stuff he said to Rome, but I don't think people are going to put stock in it. So I do think Tiana's in danger. Maybe Kyle for blue. I don't see people going after Sue or Gabe or Caroline just yet. I don't think anyone's saying Caroline's name.
Okay, just keep going. I have one more thing
to
say.
So to kind of agree with you, I think Tiana for blue could be in danger next week, as well as maybe Kyle, but mainly Tiana. And then for yellow, I don't think Andy's going to be the target. I think Andy's going to be the perpetual pawn. He'll be the perpetual backup name. Even though I do think Sam's going to eventually get himself into trouble, I don't think it's going to happen next week. So I'll stick with saying Tiana or Kyle are in danger next week, with Andy being the decoy. And don't sleep on Rachel being able to start to make a comeback. But what were you going to say?
Yeah. Gabe's edit is curious to me, and Caroline's edit is also curious to me. I have zero clue what to think of Caroline. Every time we see her, it's usually something good, right? But we haven't really heard like anybody besides Sue talk about their thoughts on Caroline. And that's why I think her edit's so weird. Where like, I know yellow, like I know what everybody thinks of everybody. Red, I pretty much know what everybody thinks of everybody. Blue, it's like, I know what some people think of some people, but the only person I have heard talk about Caroline on the entire season so far is Sue in a positive light. Nobody else has pretty much mentioned her at all. She's just like kind of been there and been like, oh, me and Sue are going deep. Yeah, right. Like I don't know. Like clearly that duo is important to the season. Clearly Caroline is important to the season. We keep seeing her. I don't know what her role is. I don't know. It's a curious edit to me as well.
What's interesting, Dylan? It's almost like Caroline. I mean, I'm holding a coin, but it's almost like for those that listening, not watching, I'm holding a coin, but it's basically like Sue and Caroline are like the other half of the coin of like Sam and Sierra, where Sam and Sierra are a duo. They're a public duo, and people are like, oh, we got to target them, or they're running the show. Meanwhile, Kyle and Gabe have independently said, oh, Sue and Caroline are a duo, but they're not a threat. They're not good at challenges. They're not good socially because they're a very obvious duo. And Gabe was even like, yeah, they're going to be like my goats or whatever. But basically, they're like opposites, where people want to target Sam and Sierra, and everybody knows Sue and Caroline are kind of like a mom-daughter type of duo, but no one is actively targeting them. Like it's very interesting.
I love that comparison. I think that's a good call.
Because you would think if they're a very obvious duo, unless you see them as a shield, you would think someone would say, I want to break up that duo. But maybe at this point in the game, you're a final 12. Like, why go for a duo when you can kind of hide behind them for a bit? Because at some point, let's just make it easy. Let's just say the next few boots are, I'll make it up. Tiana goes. Let's just say, Andy gets himself voted out. Kyle goes. Sam goes. At some point, you're going to have these individual people like the Teenies, the Souls and whatnot, the Rachels, and then you might have some duos like Sam and Sierra. You have Caroline and Sue. You're going to eventually want to target the duos, because duos or even trios, like if you lump in Gabe with them, they become more dangerous as the numbers start to dwindle. So at some point you have to go for them, but I don't see people going after Sue and Caroline right now at all.
Yeah. I think you're correct. I'm trying to think if there was anything. Oh yeah. The other thing I was going to say.
Yeah.
Andy might be like the Q of the season. Like he's gonna keep. When I say that is because Q's name was consistently brought up every single vote. Like we're gonna vote out Q. We're gonna vote out Q. But Q was always the decoy vote for the most part, and it screwed everybody up. And Andy, while I would say having a much higher winning percentage chance than Q did, Andy there's a chance he consistently is brought up like, oh, we're going to vote out Andy, but we're not really voting out Andy. We're voting out this person, but we're going to so I kind of see him being like the name that nobody's afraid to throw out there. Yeah. But is he really the plan? Probably not. So that's what I make the Q comparison, not actually in like and pretty much anything else, but just that position, I should say.
And by the way, really quickly, speaking of Andy, I forgot to mention when we were going through the start of the episode, and you were saying how, like, after the tribal council, Rachel was on the outs and Andy's on the rise and whatnot. we didn't see it, but I'm actually surprised, and maybe Rachel's keeping it in her back pocket that she hasn't mentioned the idol yet, because I really do think this is the biggest problem for Sam, where like Sam could have just and I know we didn't podcast last week. He could have just told Andy, hey, I found this. I'm going to flush it. It's a one-time idol. Annika's gone. I'm going to use it on you or whatever. I'm going to flush it. Because he didn't do that, and Andy has loose lips, because obviously the whole breadwinners thing was spilled from Andy to back to Sam. At some point, if Sam tries to flash his idol, well, his it's now a dead idol, but as like a decoy, Andy at some point is going to have loose lips and go back to Rachel and say, Sam did this or whatever. And then Rachel's just going to say, oh, by the way, he found that and he didn't tell you. I really do think this is going to cause a lot of problems for Sam, this idol that he didn't play. And I feel like last week he could have just flushed it on himself or on Andy.
Yeah. All he had to do was even if he didn't tell Andy, if he played the idol on Andy, then Andy's not complaining about that.
Yeah, no one's going to complain if you got an idol use on you.
Yeah. So I think there's a reason that was brought up as well. I think that's it for this episode, but I'm super excited going forward. I really enjoyed the season so far.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen some mixed, just to wrap up, I've seen like some mixed reactions where I've seen some people say, and I've talked to a bunch of friends who watch, some of them have been really liking the season. Some of them have been like, it's been some good moves, but like the cast isn't like popping for me. For me personally, I am enjoying the season. I think it's been 6 actually pretty good episodes. Every vote has either been like a betrayal or a blindside. And even in Rome's case, even though the audience knew what was going to happen, Rome didn't see it coming. Although he said on his exit press that he was like 50% sure it was him. But I do think that we're off to a good start with the season. Jeff has been right that the theme of the season so far has been betrayals. And I do think we're set up like we've been talking about, where red's going to fall into the background and blue and yellow are going to kind of fire at each other. So even though we're still halfway through, way too soon to make comparisons, if we have to look at the 7 New Era seasons, so far, Dylan, I feel comfortable saying this for me is like kind of like in the upper middle, where we've had some that have been kind of like slower and not as great. And then obviously, I think we all look at 45 and 46 as like some of our favorite New Era seasons, but this is kind of going on the rise. This, I would say, is like upper middle for me. But
I think the big difference between this season and 45 and 46 is that it was like 46 was I probably said it on the podcast. I had zero at this point in 46. I had zero hope for the season. I had zero, like even at Emergatory, I was like, I hope we start to pick up now because this is on a bad trajectory. And then it actually just like was like amazing the rest of the season. And 45, it was like so like I said, 46, it started pretty bad, and then I had no hope basically, and then it got really good, and I was like, wow, that was a huge turnaround. 45, it started not great, but I did have high hopes for the cast, and then it still got really good. This season I feel like has started high.
It's been consistent, yeah.
It started high and it's been consistent. So it's like, could it continue and go up from here, or could it not? We'll see.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of saying it. Like we've started higher at 47 than we did for the other ones. Now, to your point, will 47 reach the highs of 45 and 46? I don't know, but it's at least started like more consistent, which is good.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's all for today. We will hopefully be back next week to recap episode 7, and I'm super excited for the rest of the season.
I'm excited. We're at the merge. Grab your torches and head back to camp.
Good night.